Chapter 6. When Summer didn't hear from Jackson all that day, she began calling local precincts and filing a missing persons report. She was told to wait 48 hours, and that she need more than a first name before they could begin their search, and if he was a veteran, then she would have to notify the Veterans Affairs in Houston. All she could do was pace around the house and worry. She walked into his room, looking around. Maybe there was something there that would give her some indication of what had happened to him. Her mind was filled with thoughts and fears. Maybe his memory came back like his eyesight, and he drove home to be with his family. She couldn't fault him for that. But what she could fault him for was not calling her and taking her car. It was her only transportation. She needed it to get back and forth to work. All things large and small ran through her mind. Perhaps he left her because he couldn't make a living. Maybe his memory returned and he wanted to start a new life. She chided herself for thinking those things because she was a good judge of character and he was a good man. She felt he would have called and apologized if he discovered he had a wife and children. He wouldn't just desert her, leaving her to wonder about him. He wasn't a cruel man. He was a good man, she murmured. Summer came to the conclusion that something beyond his control had occurred. She became frantic, but she tried to calm herself. She decided she would try to get someone to take her to the nearest car rental. There were neighbors down the road who she could talk to. She would get up early the next day and walk over to the nearest trailer. Earlier, she saw the older couple who lived there sitting outside and looking over and waving. She and Jackson had waved back. They even discussed visiting them. Sleep didn't come easy. As soon as the sun rose, Summer jumped up, tired from her sleepless night, and got dressed in slacks and a sweatshirt, then headed out the door. She didn't even stop to make coffee. It was a glorious morning with the sun slashing through the trees, highlighting the dew on the grass. She looked around and felt alone. Adam disappeared like the dew in the morning, she thought. Why had he gone off so quickly once he gained his sight? He could be here with her, enjoying the beauty of this morning. The smell of the fresh air and the walk gave her time to think. She thought of her 18th birthday when she woke in Jackson's bed. He sat up, smiling and leaning over her. She remembered his words. "Wake up, sleeping beauty. Wake up, my angel," he had said. "Where am I?" "You're in my room." He gave her a smirk and winked. "And I'm in your bed?" she questioned. "Yes, and what could be more wonderful than this? Look out at the terrace and the hills and trees. Don't you just love San Francisco?" "I'm 17, Jackson, and I shouldn't be here. Besides, all I see is the fog." "Today you're 18 and you should be exactly where you are, except I should be with you and we should be naked and should just have had the most mind-blowing sex of our young lives, but instead nothing happened." He placed his hand over his heart. "I promise you." "Then why did I fall asleep? We talked all night, and then I looked over and you had passed out in my arms. It would have been a shame to wake you. You were so beautiful, lying in my arms, that I wanted it to last forever." He gave her a smile. "You know, I've never been with a girl where I've only engaged in a conversation. And I have never had a girl sleep in my bed before." "I guess I can consider myself lucky," Summer said, looking into his gorgeous face. "No, I'm the lucky one. I have discovered something about myself." Summer's feet hit the floor, and she noticed that Jackson lay in bed with only his pajama bottoms on. She tried not to look at his incredible, hot body. Turning in a circle, afraid to leave his room, she asked, "Where is Tiffany?" She walked toward the door, then hesitated, looking out the window. "She is somewhere in the house. I can't vouch for her." He raised his hands, laughing. Summer smiled, remembering that day. She missed Jackson. But most of all, she missed being with Adam. Summer trotted up the stairs and knocked on the door of the trailer. "Come in, sweetie, it's not locked." "It's wonderful to be so trusting," she thought. It's a great community. She thought of making a home there with Adam. She felt that he needed the quiet of the area to regain his memory, and since he had his eyesight, he could apply for a job. They had discussed it. She wanted it to be in this little town. A town where she could be with the man of her dreams, wake up, and spend her life with him and have children. He was such a soft-spoken man, and so easy on the eyes, too. How could he not know how handsome he is? She wanted to keep him a secret because if word got out that such a gorgeous man was here and unattached, she might lose him, but not to another woman. She might lose him to some unseen family. "Come in, sugar. Sit and have a cup of coffee." A woman, about 60 or 70 with a full head of white hair fixed in a bun, greeted Summer as she walked through the door. "I'm Jane and this is my husband Dave." She pointed to the stocky man of medium height who was sitting in the recliner watching television. He had a shock of coarse white hair and an equally white smile. His teeth were false, but the rest of him was very real. "It's not often we have visitors. Most of the folks around here don't get out much. We're all in our 70s and 80s, Dave said, turning his head, then his face returned to the local news. "My name is Summer, and yes, I'll take you up on a cup of coffee." Jane walked to the counter and poured her a steaming cup. "Do you take your coffee black?" "I do hope so because we don't have cream or sugar. Diabetes, you know." She laid the cup in front of Summer. "I'll take it black," Summer said. Jane handed Summer a slice of pound cake. "The cake will help the coffee go down better." Summer glanced at her and smiled. She broke off a piece of the cake and put it in her mouth. "Wow, this is good," she said. "Grandma's recipe, I put currants, nuts and—" She was interrupted. "Well, look at that," Dave said, taking a sip of coffee and leaning into the television as if he were watching his favorite movie. "An accident near Fort Stockton on I-10 West. A car hit a big rig and the car was totaled. Nothing left. Those big rigs are dangerous," he added. "The person driving was okay and was released this morning. Must have been a miracle, I'd say." He turned to face Summer. "It's an old car. They used to know how to build cars that last. I had a Chevy like that, wish I still had one. I hear you can get good money for one at auction in Houston. The cars nowadays, if you even so much as back into a post, you could lose your life." "Okay, Dave, let the lady have something to say." Jane interrupted, touching Dave's shoulder. Summer's eyes were plastered to the television, trying to see what type of car had been demolished. She missed the comment about the Chevy. What color? What year? Her car was an old Chevy Malibu. "Where is that husband of yours?" Dave said, turning, meeting Summer's panicked eyes. "He drove to Fort Stockton. That's why I walked over here. He left yesterday, and I haven't heard from him. Could be he's the one that ran into the back of that truck. That car you two drove up in looks just like the one in the accident. Blue Chevy Malibu, I think." "Yes, indeed, just like yours," Dave said, eating a piece of pound cake. Summer caught her breath with her hands to her chest. "Did they say anything more?" "Only that the young man was released." "Can someone drive me to Fort Stockton now?" Her eyes pooled with tears. Jane saw it and she felt her pain. "Yes, dear, Dave will be happy to take you wherever you need to go." Dave got up, took off his house slippers, slipped on his boots, tied them, and said he would be happy to take Summer. For Dave, it felt good having something to do to pass the time. Summer arrived at the nearest highway patrol station, inquiring about the accident. She was informed that they had traced the car to her, and that no one was hurt in the accident. The individual driving the car didn't know who owned it and why he was driving this beat-up old car, or where he was going and why. Furthermore, the officer stated, Mr. Jackson Van Hughes left money for anyone who came to claim the car, and he hoped the amount was sufficient to compensate the individual for their loss and for the purchase of a new car. The information shook Summer. Did he say Jackson Van Hughes? She had to ask again. She knew it was something about him that was unsettling. Could Adam be the boy who she had fallen in love with in high school? Could he be the one who promised to find her and marry her one day? It was difficult to believe that it could be him. Yet all of the signs were there, his kiss, her reaction to his body. She had never reacted to another man in that way. She never understood why. Did Mr. Van Hughes say where he was headed? I think he mentioned that his private jet would take him to San Francisco. Summer couldn't believe the coincidence. It had to be him. The Jackson she knew when they were alone had the best qualities. It was his cocky persona of being a football jock that people saw, not the caring, considerate young man that she knew. He never let anyone get close to him to see the other side of him. He had to keep up the persona of the bad boy, a womanizer, which his fellow football players heaped on him and blew his reputation out of proportion. Jackson was bigger than life, a golden boy who could do no wrong and would win games under adverse conditions. He played with pneumonia, he played with injuries to his arms and legs, still he threw the longest pass ever recorded in a high school or college game. He went on to win the final game of the season, limping, as he ran and dove for a touchdown. There were no athletes his age to compare to him because there were none who could match him. He was the best and the brightest. And when all the football scouts came calling, he agreed to go to Stanford, which was his father's alma mater. Summer was the only girl to get close enough in one night to see the man he would become. And she liked what she saw. Her memories of the young Jackson were vivid. She woke the day after her 18th birthday, making a mad scramble out of his bed. "What time is it?" she asked, looking around in panic. "About 9. "Let's go to breakfast," Jackson said. "I can't, I have to get home." She jumped from the large bed onto the hardwood floor. Looking into the floor-to-wall mirror, she said, "I look terrible." She took her hand and tried to rake her fingers through her hair. "You look beautiful," he said, laughing at how amusing Summer appeared, trying to comb her hair with one hand and straightening her white linen pants and top with the other. "Are you laughing at me?" She paused for a moment, realizing that she didn't care. "I knew I shouldn't have worn this. My mother and father will know," she said frantically. Laughing still, Jackson pulled a pair of white sweats from his closet. "Here," he threw them on the bed, "wear my sweats." Summer didn't think, and in a mad panic, she pulled her pants off as Jackson stood looking at her in her sheer panties. "Gorgeous." "I was wondering what you were hiding," Jackson said. Summer peeked at herself and hid behind the door to the closet. "They're too long and I look ridiculous in them," she said, throwing the clothes back at him and then dragging the legs of her linen pants with her hands until she had them within her grasp. "I need to find Tiffany. I can borrow clothes from her and change at her home," she said, breathless. Dashing out of the room with Jackson following her without a shirt, he stopped her in the middle of the foyer. "Wait, you haven't said when I can see you again?" "I'm leaving." "I know you're leaving, but—" "You don't understand, Jackson. I'm leaving San Francisco." Jackson stood still. His carefree smile drooped. She saw sadness settle in his clear blue eyes and in his face. It was the last time she saw him. She couldn't remember what he said next or what she said. She couldn't remember how she found Tiffany and how she made it home. But she remembered leaving that day sad, wondering what if. She blamed herself. She could have written to him, but she thought that their relationship meant something to her and nothing to him, when in fact, she was all he could think about for years. Summer carried the loss of her first love in her soul, only unpacking the empty feelings on special occasions. Most of the time, Summer tried not to think of him, but he was still there in the back of her mind, and whenever she saw a tall, handsome man, she couldn't resist her thoughts. She couldn't watch a college game or professional football game without wondering about Jackson. Knowing that he was far more brilliant than the average guy, she expected him to be heading his own company after college, and after playing for a pro team as a quarterback, of course. Whenever she allowed herself to think of him, she smiled. Returning home from the drive to Fort Stockton, Dave dropped her at her front door. She opened the door and gazed about her living room. She wore her empty feelings like a shroud, hiding them from herself and the world. Summer's gaze settled on the doorknob. She focused her eyes on everything Jackson had touched. She stared at the empty bed where he slept. She stared at the floor where he stood, and the shower where she knew him to be standing naked with a body to die for. She walked to the window in his room and peered out at the trees. The path was worn from their walks in the mornings after breakfast, at noon after lunch, and nights after dinner, and where they sat under the stars. The sun had been a comfort to him. The fresh air and the peace of the wilderness trail, with its pine trees and brush, had been what he needed to heal. They had pleasant evenings sitting and discussing books that she read to him. But now he was gone. The loss of his love made her joyless. She didn't have the strength to put away her thoughts of what would happen if she had agreed to marry him. Now she had neither him nor his body to love and bring her the comfort she craved. She could have seized her happiness at any cost. She could have made love to him. She saw in his eyes that he hungered for her. Her regrets were eating at her. She felt that she should do something about it whenever she had the money or the time. Could she hope that he would remember her? Could she hope to find him again? Summer bought local papers and read the San Francisco Chronicle online. She perused the paper each day, trying to find an article about Jackson. She decided to go to the library and pull up old papers from the past years.